My name is Carol Johnson. I am 56 years old. The day I received my son's wedding invitation should have been the happiest moment of my life. But when I opened that elegant envelope, my name was nowhere to be found. It simply said, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. My husband passed away 21 years ago. There is no Mr. Johnson. This was no mistake. Before I continue, please let me know where you are watching from and hit that like button if you have ever felt invisible. I need to take you back to where it all began. To truly understand why that wedding invitation cut so deep, you need to know my story. You need to know about Frank, about Derek, and about the 21 years I spent raising my son alone. Frank Johnson was the love of my life. We met at a community fair in 1985 when I was just 20 years old. He was working at a booth selling handmade wooden furniture, and I stopped to admire a rocking chair he had crafted. He smiled at me with those warm brown eyes, and I knew right then that my life was about to change. We got married 2 years later in a small church ceremony. Nothing fancy, just family and close friends. Frank wore a borrowed suit, and I wore my mother's wedding dress altered to fit my frame. We did not have much money, but we had each other, and that was enough. Frank worked as an electrician. He was not afraid of hard work. He would leave before sunrise and come home after dark, his hands calloused and his clothes covered in dust. But he never complained. Every Friday, he would bring me flowers from the grocery store. Nothing expensive, just daisies or carnations, whatever was on sale. He would hand them to me and say, "Carol, these reminded me of you. Simple, beautiful, perfect." I worked as a nurse at the county hospital. The hours were long and the work was exhausting, but I loved it. I loved helping people, making them feel cared for during their most vulnerable moments. Between Frank's income and mine, we managed to buy a small house on Maple Street. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a backyard with a tire swing. It was not a mansion, but it was ours. Derek came into our lives on a snowy December morning in 1992. I remember holding him for the first time, this tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket, and feeling my heart expand in ways I never knew possible. Frank stood beside me, tears streaming down his face. He kept saying, "We made him, Carol. We made this perfect little person." Those first 8 years were magical. Frank was an incredible father. He taught Derek how to ride a bike, how to throw a baseball, how to whistle using 2 fingers. Every Saturday, they would go on what they called adventures, exploring nearby parks, fishing at the lake, or just walking through the woods looking for interesting rocks and leaves. I would watch them from the kitchen window, my 2 boys, and feel a gratitude so profound it almost hurt. We did not have vacations to exotic places or expensive toys. But we had laughter. We had Sunday dinners. We had bedtime stories and pillow forts and homemade birthday cakes. Then came October 15th, 2000. I remember the date because it is burned into my memory like a brand. Frank left for work that morning like any other day. He kissed me goodbye, ruffled Derek's hair, and promised to bring home pizza for dinner. It was a Friday. Pizza Friday, we called it. The call came at 4:37 in the afternoon. I was at work checking on a patient when my supervisor found me. Her face told me everything before she even spoke. There had been an accident. A truck had run a red light. Frank's van was hit on the driver's side. He was pronounced dead at the scene. I do not remember much about the hours that followed. I remember screaming. I remember collapsing on the hospital floor. I remember someone driving me home, though I could not tell you who. What I remember most clearly is picking Derek up from his friend's house and having to tell him that his father was never coming home. He was 8 years old. He did not understand. He kept asking when Daddy would be back. He kept looking out the window, waiting for Frank's van to pull into the driveway. It took weeks before the reality sank in, and when it did, he stopped talking for almost a month. The funeral was small. Frank had no siblings, and his parents had passed years earlier. My family came along with some friends and co-workers. We buried him in the cemetery on Miller Road beneath an oak tree because he always loved trees. I stood there in the rain holding Derek's hand and made a silent promise to my husband. I would raise our son. I would make sure he became a good man. I would do whatever it took. And that is exactly what I did. The years that followed were the hardest of my life. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital, working nights and weekends to make ends meet. I learned how to fix leaky faucets and unclog drains because I could not afford to hire a plumber. I taught myself basic car maintenance so I would not have to pay a mechanic every time something went wrong. There were nights when I would sit at the kitchen table staring at a stack of bills, wondering how I would pay them all. There were times when I had to choose between buying new shoes for Derek or replacing the worn tires on my car. I always chose Derek. Always. I sold my wedding ring when he was 12. The gold band Frank had slipped onto my finger with such love and hope. I sold it to pay for Derek's braces because the dentist said he needed them, and I could not bear the thought of my son being teased for crooked teeth. I cried for 3 days after that. But I never told Derek. He did not need to carry that burden. Through it all, Derek was my anchor. He was a good kid, smart and hardworking. He never asked for expensive things. He wore hand-me-down clothes without complaint. He helped around the house, mowing the lawn, taking out the trash, doing whatever he could to lighten my load. When he got accepted into college, I wept with pride. And when I found out how much the tuition cost, I wept with fear. But I made it work. I took out loans. I worked double shifts. I did whatever I had to do to give my son the future he deserved. He graduated with honors, got a job at a big tech company, moved to the city, started building his own life. And I was so proud. So unbelievably proud. I never remarried. People asked me why, and I always gave the same answer. I had one great love. That was enough. The truth is, I never had time to date. Every spare moment was devoted to Derek, to working, to surviving. By the time he was grown and gone, I had forgotten how to be anything other than a mother. And I was fine with that. I had my small house, my garden, my memories of Frank, and the knowledge that I had raised a good man. That was my legacy. That was my life. Then Derek met Natalie. It started 2 years ago at a company event. Derek called me excited, telling me about this amazing woman he had met. Her name was Natalie Preston. She worked in fashion marketing. She was beautiful, sophisticated, and came from a wealthy family. I was happy for him. Of course I was. My son deserved love. He deserved happiness. When he asked if he could bring her home to meet me, I said yes, without hesitation. The first time I saw Natalie, she was stepping out of a car that cost more than my entire house. She was tall and slender, with perfectly styled blonde hair and designer clothes that probably cost more than I earned in a month. She smiled at me, a polished smile that did not quite reach her eyes, and extended her hand. "It is so nice to meet you, Mrs. Johnson," she said. "Derek has told me so much about you." Her handshake was brief, almost perfunctory. She looked around at my modest home, at the faded paint and the old furniture, and I saw something flicker across her face. It was gone in an instant, replaced by that same polished smile, but I caught it. Judgment. Maybe even disdain. I told myself I was imagining things. I made dinner that night. Pot roast with vegetables, homemade mashed potatoes, apple pie for dessert. Good, honest food, the kind Frank used to love. Natalie barely touched her plate. She pushed the food around with her fork, taking tiny bites here and there. When I asked if something was wrong, she smiled and said she was watching her carbs. Derek shot me an apologetic look. After dinner, while Derek helped me wash dishes, Natalie excused herself to make a phone call. I heard her on the porch talking to someone, her voice low, but not low enough. "It is fine," she was saying. "It is just very simple. Very small town. You know how it is." I pretended I did not hear. I told myself it did not matter. What mattered was that Derek was happy. A few months later, I was invited to meet Natalie's family, the Prestons. Dinner was at the country club where they were members. I wore my best dress, the one I saved for church and special occasions. It was navy blue with small white flowers. I thought I looked nice. When I arrived, Patricia Preston, Natalie's mother, looked me up and down with barely concealed amusement. Her own outfit probably cost more than my car. She had perfectly coiffed gray hair, immaculate makeup, and jewelry that sparkled under the chandelier lights. "Carol," she said, drawing out my name like it was something distasteful. "So lovely to finally meet you. Natalie tells us you were a nurse." "I am," I said. "Retired now, but I worked at the county hospital for over 30 years. "How nice," Patricia said in a tone that suggested it was anything but. "And your husband, will he be joining us?" "My husband passed away 21 years ago." Oh, she did not offer condolences. She simply turned to her husband. "Howard, come meet Derek's mother." Howard Preston was a large man with silver hair and an air of importance. He owned a real estate development company, one of the biggest in the region. He shook my hand firmly, said hello, and then immediately turned to Derek to talk about stocks and investments. I spent most of that dinner feeling invisible. The Prestons talked about their vacation home in the Hamptons, their golf trips to Scotland, their yacht. They asked Derek about his career, his ambitions, his salary. They did not ask me a single question about myself. At one point, Patricia mentioned how wonderful it was that Derek had risen above his circumstances. She said it with a smile like it was a compliment, but I felt the sting beneath the words. His circumstances. My circumstances. The implication that we were somehow less than. I went home that night and cried for the first time in years. But I kept my concerns to myself. Derek was in love. Natalie made him happy. Who was I to interfere? When he told me they were engaged, I hugged him tight and told him I was thrilled. And part of me was. Part of me truly was. The engagement party was held at the Preston estate. I was invited, but when I arrived, no one seemed to know what to do with me. I wandered around trying to make conversation, but everyone seemed to already know each other. Old money families, country club friends, people who summered in places I had only seen in magazines. At one point, I overheard Patricia talking to a group of women. She was gesturing toward me, though I could not hear what she was saying. They all laughed. One of them patted Patricia's arm sympathetically. I left early that night claiming a headache. No one noticed. Then came the wedding invitation. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in April. A thick cream-colored envelope with elegant gold lettering. My heart swelled with anticipation as I carried it inside. This was my son's wedding. The most important day of his life. I set down my purse, made myself a cup of tea, and sat at the kitchen table to open it properly. The envelope was heavy, expensive paper, the kind that whispers of wealth and sophistication. I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out the invitation. It was beautiful. Embossed lettering, delicate illustrations, the works. But as I read the front of the envelope, my heart stopped. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. I read it again, and again, and again. There was no Carol. No Mrs. Carol Johnson, just Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. My husband had been dead for 21 years. There was no Mr. Johnson. I sat there staring at those words, feeling the blood drain from my face. This had to be a mistake. Surely this was just an oversight. Perhaps whoever addressed the envelopes simply did not know. But even as I tried to rationalize it, something in my gut told me the truth. This was deliberate. I picked up my phone and called Derek. He answered on the fourth ring, sounding distracted. "Mom, what is up? I am kind of in the middle of something." "I received the wedding invitation," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The envelope says Mr. and Mrs. Johnson." "Yeah, so Derek, your father, passed away 21 years ago. There is no Mr. Johnson." There was a pause. I could hear papers shuffling in the background. "Look, Mom Natalie and her mother handled all the invitations. It is probably just a formal thing. You know, traditional wording or whatever. Do not worry about it. Traditional wording? Derek, it does not even have my name on it. It is like I do not exist." "Mom, you are overreacting. I will ask Natalie about it, okay? But I am sure it is nothing. Can you call me back after you talk to her?" "Sure, yeah. I have got to go. Love you." The line went dead before I could say anything else. I waited. 3 days passed. No call from Derek. I texted him asking if he had spoken to Natalie. His response was brief. She said it is just the formal way they do things. Traditional etiquette. Do not worry about it. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe this was all a simple misunderstanding. But something kept nagging at me. That evening, I went on social media. Natalie had been posting regularly about the wedding preparations, flower arrangements, cake tastings, venue photos. I scrolled through her feed until I found what I was looking for. A photo of the wedding invitations stacked neatly on a table. She had captioned it, "Ready to send love and joy to all our favorite people." I zoomed in on the envelopes. Some of them were clearly visible. Mr. Howard Preston and Mrs. Patricia Preston, Ms. Jennifer Adams, Dr. and Mrs. Robert Hayes. Full names, complete addresses, proper titles. And then there was mine. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. No first names, no individual recognition. Just a title that referenced a dead man. I put down my phone, my hands trembling. This was not a mistake. This was not traditional etiquette. This was intentional. They had erased me. I could not sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my mind. The polished smiles, the subtle jabs, the way Patricia looked at my dress, at my house, at my life. The way Natalie pushed food around her plate like it was beneath her. I had spent 2 years convincing myself that I was imagining things, that I was being oversensitive, that my son's happiness was all that mattered. But the invitation forced me to confront what I had been avoiding. They did not want me there. The next 2 weeks were torture. I went about my daily routine, gardening, running errands, visiting with my friend Margaret, but my mind kept circling back to that envelope. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, like a ghost being invited to a wedding, like I was already dead. Finally, I received a phone call from Patricia Preston herself. "Carol," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "We are having a small gathering to discuss wedding details. Natalie thought you might like to come." I was surprised by the invitation, but I accepted. Perhaps this was my chance to clear the air, to address the situation directly. I drove to the Preston estate on a Saturday afternoon. It was a massive house, the kind you see in architectural magazines. Perfectly manicured lawns, a circular driveway, columns flanking the front entrance. I parked my 12-year-old sedan next to a row of luxury vehicles and felt immediately out of place. Patricia opened the door before I could ring the bell. She was dressed in cream-colored slacks and a cashmere sweater pearls around her neck. She looked at the flowers and homemade cookies I had brought with a tight smile. "How thoughtful," she said, taking them from me without enthusiasm. "Come in." The living room was larger than my entire house. Crystal chandeliers, silk curtains, furniture that looked too expensive to sit on. Natalie was perched on a settee, scrolling through her phone. She barely glanced up when I entered. "Mrs. Johnson," she said. "So glad you could make it." Not Carol. Not even a hello. "Mrs. Johnson." I sat down on the edge of an armchair, feeling like an intruder in my own son's life. Patricia began talking about the wedding plans, the venue, the flowers, the catering, the photographer. Everything had already been decided. My input was clearly not needed or wanted. At one point, I tried to ask about my role in the ceremony. I was wondering, I said, where I will be seated during the reception, and if there is anything you would like me to help with. Patricia exchanged a glance with Natalie, a look that said more than words ever could. "Oh, you will have a lovely seat," Patricia assured me. "We have arranged for the families to be separated slightly. You know, to give everyone room. As for helping, we have everything under control. You just need to show up." I nodded, swallowing my disappointment. Then I noticed something on the coffee table. A printed list. Guest names and numbers. I leaned forward slightly, pretending to admire a flower arrangement, and read what I could. Preston Family and Friends, 162. Johnson Family 1. 1. I was the only representative of the Johnson family. Derek's aunts, uncles, cousins, the people who had watched him grow up. None of them were invited. And I was counted as one guest, not even allowed a +1. I asked about it, trying to keep my voice calm. "I noticed the guest list," I said. "It looks like only I am listed for Derek's family. I was hoping to invite my sister Judith and my friend Margaret. They have known Derek since he was a baby." Patricia's smile turned icy. "Unfortunately, the venue has strict capacity limits. We have had to make difficult choices. But I am sure Derek has already mentioned this to you." He had not. Derek had said nothing. "I understand," I said, though I did not. "Not really." Natalie finally looked up from her phone. Her expression was unreadable. "We have to prioritize," she said. "It is just how these things work." I nodded again. What else could I do? As I was leaving, someone caught up to me in the driveway. It was Tommy Preston, Natalie's younger brother. He was 24, with kind eyes that seemed out of place in that family. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, slightly out of breath. "Can I talk to you for a second?" "Of course." He glanced back at the house, then lowered his voice. "I want to apologize for how they are treating you." I blinked at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" Tommy shifted uncomfortably. He looked like he was wrestling with whether to continue. "I heard them talking," he finally said. "My mom and Natalie. They were discussing the invitations, and I heard them say that they wanted to minimize the groom's side of the family. Natalie said your presence would make the wedding seem less, I do not know, less elegant." I felt my stomach drop. "Less elegant." Tommy continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "My mom said something about you being a widowed nurse, living in a small house. She said having you stand next to Derek during photos would bring down the aesthetic." I could not speak. I could not breathe. The invitation, Tommy went on, the one addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. That was intentional. My mom laughed about it. She said if anyone asked, they could claim it was a printing error. He looked at me with genuine sympathy. "I am really sorry, Mrs. Johnson. I think what they are doing is wrong." I thanked him quietly, though I barely heard my own words. I got in my car and drove away. My vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. When I got home, I did not go inside right away. I sat in my car in the driveway for what felt like hours, replaying Tommy's words. Less elegant, a widowed nurse, would bring down the aesthetic. I had given everything to raise Derek. I had sacrificed my career, my social life, my dreams, everything. And now, in the eyes of his future in-laws, I was an embarrassment, something to be minimized. I thought about Frank, about the promise I had made at his grave. I told him I would raise our son right, that I would make sure Derek became a good man. Had I failed? Or had I simply lost him to people who measured worth in dollars and appearances? I finally went inside, locked the door behind me, and let the tears come. The next few days were a blur. I went through the motions of living, but inside, I was crumbling. Margaret came over for coffee, took one look at my face, and demanded to know what was wrong. I told her everything: the invitation, the guest list, Tommy's revelation. Margaret was furious on my behalf. Her face turned red, and she slammed her coffee cup on the table so hard it nearly cracked. Those pompous entitled, she struggled to find words strong enough. "Carol, you cannot let them get away with this. You need to talk to Derek." "I have tried. He does not see it. Or he does not want to see it. Then make him see it. You are his mother. You deserve better than this." I nodded, but I did not feel convinced. Part of me wondered if I was making too big a deal out of everything. Maybe I was being oversensitive. Maybe I should just swallow my pride and be grateful I was invited at all. But another part of me, a part that had stayed silent for far too long, was beginning to stir. That part remembered every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every tear shed in secret. That part knew I deserved more than to be erased from my own son's wedding. I decided to call Derek. Not to accuse or demand, but to have an honest conversation. He agreed to come for dinner that Friday. Just the two of us like the old days. I cooked his favorite meal: chicken parmesan with homemade pasta, garlic bread, chocolate cake for dessert. I set the table with the good china, the set that had been my mother's, and waited. He arrived 30 minutes late, his phone buzzing constantly with texts and notifications. "Sorry," he said, barely making eye contact. "Work has been crazy." We sat down to eat. I tried to make small talk, asking about his job, his apartment, his life. He answered in monosyllables, distracted, checking his phone every few seconds. Finally, I could not hold back any longer. "Derek," I said, setting down my fork, "we need to talk about the wedding." He sighed, like I was bringing up an exhausting topic. "Mom, I already told you. The invitation thing was just a formality." "It was not just a formality," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I know the truth. I know it was intentional." That got his attention. He looked up, his expression wary. "What are you talking about?" I told him what Tommy had said. The conversation about minimizing my presence. The comment about me being a widowed nurse who would bring down the aesthetic. The deliberate choice to address the invitation to Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. Derek's face went through several emotions: surprise, doubt, defensive anger. "Tommy is just a kid," he said. "He probably misunderstood." "Did he misunderstand that I am the only guest from your side, that I am not even allowed to bring your aunt or my best friend?" Derek hesitated. "That is just because of space limitations." "Space limitations, they have over 160 guests from her side." 160, Derek. And I am one. Just one. He did not have an answer for that. I pressed on my voice, trembling but determined. "I am your mother. I raised you alone for 21 years. I sold my wedding ring to pay for your braces. I worked double shifts to put you through college. I have given you everything I have, and now I am being treated like an embarrassment. Like something to hide." Derek's jaw tightened. "Mom, you are making this about you. This is my wedding. Can you not just be happy for me?" The words hit like a physical blow. "Happy for you," I repeated, my voice cracking. "Derek, I have always been happy for you. I have always put you first. But I am also a person. I have feelings. I deserve to be treated with respect even at your wedding." He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I cannot do this right now," he said. "You are being unreasonable." "Unreasonable, Derek. They called me an embarrassment. They said I would bring down the aesthetic. How is that unreasonable?" He did not answer. He was already heading for the door. "Derek, please. I am not trying to ruin anything. I just want to be acknowledged. I want to exist at my own son's wedding." He paused at the doorway, his back to me. For a moment, I thought he might turn around, might say something, might see me. Instead, he walked out without another word. I stood alone in my kitchen, surrounded by a meal neither of us had finished, and felt something inside me break. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the dark, thinking about everything. About Frank, about Derek, about the woman I had become. A woman who sacrificed everything for her child. A woman who was now being told she was not good enough to be seen at his wedding. At 3 a.m, I called my sister Judith. She answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep, but immediately alert when she heard me crying. I told her everything, every detail, every hurt, every humiliation. Judith was silent for a long moment after I finished. Then she spoke, her voice firm. "Carol, you cannot go to that wedding. Not like this. Not as someone being hidden and diminished. You deserve better. But he is my son, and he needs to learn that being your son does not give him the right to let people disrespect you. If you go along with this, you are telling him it is okay. You are telling them it is okay." I thought about her words. She was right. I knew she was right. But the thought of missing my son's wedding was almost unbearable. For days I wrestled with the decision. Margaret came over again. She agreed with Judith. "You have spent your whole life putting Derek first," she said. "Maybe it is time to put yourself first. Just this once." I thought about Frank, about what he would say if he were here. I imagined his voice steady and sure. "You are not just a mother, Carol. You are a person, and you deserve to be treated like one." On a Thursday morning, exactly 3 weeks before the wedding, I made my decision. I picked up my phone and called Patricia Preston. She answered with her usual false warmth. "Carol, how lovely to hear from you. I hope you are getting excited about the big day." I took a deep breath. "Actually, Patricia, that is why I am calling. I will not be attending the wedding." The line went silent. I could almost hear her shock through the phone. "I am sorry. What did you say? I will not be attending." I repeated, my voice calm and clear. "I do not wish to have my presence bring down the aesthetic." Another long pause. When Patricia spoke again, her voice had lost all pretense of warmth. "I do not know what you think you heard, but I assure you, I know exactly what I heard," I interrupted. "I know about the conversations you and Natalie had. I know the invitation was deliberate. I know you wanted to minimize my presence because I am just a widowed nurse from a small house. I have heard enough. Carol, this is completely out of line. No, Patricia. What is out of line is treating the mother of the groom like an embarrassment. What is out of line is erasing my name from my own son's wedding invitation. I have spent 21 years raising Derek alone, and I refuse to be humiliated at his wedding." Before she could respond, I continued. "Please give my congratulations to Natalie and Derek. I wish them nothing but happiness. But I will not be there." I hung up before she could say another word. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I sat down at my kitchen table and wrote a letter to Derek. Not angry, not accusatory, just honest. I told him about my love for him, about the 21 years I had devoted to raising him, about the sacrifices I had made gladly without regret. I told him about the pain of feeling erased, of being treated like an embarrassment by the family he was marrying into. I told him I was not coming to the wedding. I explained that this was not a punishment. It was a choice to respect myself, even if it meant missing the most important day of his life. I told him I loved him. That I would always love him, that nothing could ever change that. But I also told him that love does not mean accepting disrespect. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. I sealed the letter and set it aside. I would give it to him at the right moment. Then I sent a brief email to Derek, keeping it simple. I will not be attending the wedding. My presence would only diminish the occasion. I wish you and Natalie all the happiness in the world. Your mother. I closed my laptop and looked around my quiet house. The house where I had raised my son. The house filled with memories of Frank, of bedtime stories, of birthday parties and holiday dinners. I did not cry. I had done enough crying. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Relief, strength, pride. I had spent my whole life putting others first. For once, I was putting myself first, and it felt like victory. The fallout was immediate. My phone exploded with calls and texts within hours of my email. Derek, Natalie, even Patricia. I did not answer any of them. Derek's messages ranged from angry to pleading. You cannot be serious. Mom, this is completely selfish. Please, we need to talk. I read them all, but did not respond. Not yet. He needed time to sit with this, to really think about what had happened. Natalie's messages were shorter and sharper. You are ruining everything. This is supposed to be our day. I cannot believe you would do this to Derek. I deleted those without a second thought. Patricia did not text. She called 3 times. Each time, I let it go to voicemail. The first message was polite but strained, asking me to reconsider. The second was more aggressive, implying that I was being dramatic and immature. The third was coldly furious. I hope you realize what you are doing to your relationship with your son. If you do not attend this wedding, you may never get him back. I listened to that last message twice. Then I deleted it. Margaret and Judith both called to check on me. They were proud of my decision, though concerned about how I was holding up. I am okay, I told them. Surprisingly okay. And I was. The hardest part was over. I had made my choice. Now I just had to live with it. 2 days after my email, Derek showed up at my door. It was evening. I was in the garden pulling weeds when I heard his car pull into the driveway. I stood up slowly, brushing dirt from my hands, and watched him approach. His face was a storm of emotions: anger, frustration, confusion, and underneath it all, something that looked like fear. Mom, we need to talk, he said. I gestured toward the porch. Let us sit. We settled into the wicker chairs, the same chairs where Frank and I used to watch sunsets together. Derek sat forward, elbows on knees, not looking at me. You cannot skip my wedding, he said finally. You just cannot. I can, I said quietly. And I am. Why? Because of some stupid misunderstanding about an invitation? It is not a misunderstanding, Derek. You know that. He was quiet for a moment. Then he shook his head. I talked to Natalie. She said her mom can be a little snobby sometimes, but she did not mean anything by it. It is just how their world works. Their world, I repeated. A world where I am an embarrassment to be hidden away. That is not true. Is it not? I leaned forward, looking him directly in the eyes. Derek. I was invited as Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. Your father has been dead for 21 years. I was listed as one guest out of over 160. I was told the venue has space limitations while they invite everyone they have ever met. Your aunt, your cousin, my best friend, people who have loved you your whole life. They were not even considered. Derek shifted uncomfortably. That is just, it is complicated. It is not complicated at all, I said. It is very simple. They do not think I am good enough. And apparently you agree. He flinched at that. Mom, That is not fair. Then tell me I am wrong, I said. Tell me you stood up for me. Tell me you told Natalie and her mother that I deserve to be treated with respect. Tell me you did anything to defend me. His silence was answer enough. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the letter I had written. I want you to read this, I said, handing it to him. Not now. Later, when you are alone. He took it reluctantly. What is it, the truth? About how I feel. About what I have done for you. About what I need from you now. He stared at the envelope in his hands. Then he looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than defensiveness in his eyes. Mom? He started, then stopped. His jaw worked like he was struggling to find words. I waited. I did not know he said finally, his voice rough. About what they said. About the aesthetic thing. Tommy told you? Yes. Derek closed his eyes, rubbing his face with his hands. I am sorry, he said. I should have paid more attention. I should have asked questions. Yes, I agreed. You should have. We sat in silence for a long moment. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I watched the colors shift, feeling the weight of everything unsaid between us. Finally, Derek spoke again. I am going to fix this. I looked at him. What do you mean? I am going to talk to Natalie. Really talk. And her mother. This is not okay. You are my mom. You deserve to be at my wedding. You deserve to be treated with respect. I felt a small flutter of hope, but pushed it down. I needed more than promises. I appreciate that, Derek. But I need you to understand something. I am not coming back to be humiliated. I am not coming back to be one guest hidden in the corner. If I come to your wedding, it will be as your mother, the woman who raised you, the woman who deserves to stand beside you. He nodded slowly. I understand. He stood up, letter still clutched in his hand, and looked at me with something like resolve. I love you, Mom. I should have said it more. I should have shown it more. But I am going to make this right. He left without another word. I sat on the porch until the stars came out, wondering if he really could. 3 days later, I received a new wedding invitation in the mail. The envelope was hand-addressed, and on the front, in elegant script, it read, Mrs. Carol Johnson. Inside was the same beautiful invitation as before, but there was also a handwritten note from Derek. Mom, I am so sorry for everything. You were right, about all of it. I talked to Natalie, and things are going to change. Please come. I need you there. I love you, Derek. I held that note for a long time, tears streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness this time, tears of relief. I was still angry, still hurt. But my son had heard me. He had fought for me. That was a start. The wedding day arrived on a perfect June morning. Blue skies, gentle breeze, the scent of roses in the air. Judith flew in from Ohio to be with me. Margaret insisted on doing my hair and makeup. Together, they helped me prepare for a day I was not sure would ever come. I wore a navy blue dress, simple but elegant. I had bought it new with money I had been saving for a rainy day. Today felt like sunshine after a long storm. We arrived at the venue, a beautiful garden estate that probably cost more than I earned in a year. Luxury cars lined the driveway. Well-dressed guests milled about, champagne glasses in hand. For a moment, my confidence wavered. I felt small again, out of place. Then Judith squeezed my hand. You belong here, she whispered. More than any of them. I straightened my spine and walked in. Patricia saw me almost immediately. Her expression flickered surprise and something else, maybe respect, before settling into a neutral smile. "Carol," she said, "I am glad you could make it." I nodded politely. "Thank you for having me." It was not warm, but it was civil. That was enough. Tommy Preston found me before the ceremony started. He was beaming. "Mrs. Johnson, I heard about what happened, that you stood up for yourself. I think that was really brave." I smiled at him, this young man who had been brave enough to tell me the truth. "Thank you, Tommy, for everything." Natalie approached me next. She looked stunning in her wedding gown, though her expression was uncertain. "Mrs. Johnson?" she said, hesitantly. I hope we can move forward. I know things got off to a rough start." I studied her face. There was no apology in her words, not really. But there was something else. An acknowledgement, perhaps. An opening. "I hope so too, Natalie, for Derek's sake." She nodded, then moved on to greet other guests. It was not reconciliation, but it was not war either. Before the ceremony began, Derek found me in the garden. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, but what struck me most was his expression. Gone was the defensive tension. In its place was something softer, warmer. "Mom," he said, pulling me into a hug. "Thank you for coming. I know I do not deserve it after how I acted." I held him tight, this man who had once been my little boy. "You are my son," I said. "I would walk through fire for you. But I also expect you to walk through fire for me. That is how love works." He pulled back, nodding. "I know. I am learning." The ceremony was beautiful. I sat in the front row on the groom's side. Judith beside me, Margaret on my other side. When Derek took his place at the altar, he looked over at me and smiled. I smiled back, tears already forming. The vows were traditional, simple, heartfelt. Watching my son promise to love and cherish another person filled me with complex emotions. Joy for his happiness. Grief for Frank, who should have been here. Pride in the man Derek had become, despite the rocky path we had traveled. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the crowd applauded. Natalie and Derek kissed, then turned to face their guests. Derek's eyes found mine again. He mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." I nodded, wiping my tears. The reception was lavish. Crystal chandeliers, gourmet food, a live orchestra. Everything the Prestons had dreamed of for their daughter. But somewhere in the midst of all that elegance, something unexpected happened. The band shifted to a slow song, and Derek made his way through the crowd toward me. "May I have this dance?" he asked, extending his hand. I took it, and he led me to the dance floor. Around us, I felt the eyes of every guest. Patricia watching from her table, Natalie pausing mid-conversation, the society friends who had laughed at me months ago. Let them watch. I danced with my son, the son I had raised alone for 21 years, the son I had fought for, the son who had finally learned to fight for me too. "I am proud of you," I whispered. "I am proud of you too, Mom," he replied, "for not giving up on me." We swayed together as the song played on mother and son, surrounded by strangers, but not alone. Later, during his speech, Derek did something I did not expect. He talked about me. "Everything I am," he said, holding the microphone, looking directly at me, "I owe to one person. My mother. She raised me alone after my father died. She sacrificed everything so I could have a better life. She taught me what strength looks like, what love looks like, what integrity looks like. Mom, I know I have not always shown it, but you are my hero. This day would not mean anything without you here. The room applauded. I saw Patricia's expression tighten, but I did not care. I did not care about her, or her world, or her judgments. My son had seen me, had acknowledged me, had honored me in front of everyone. That was all I needed. The months after the wedding brought slow but meaningful changes. Derek called more often. Real calls, not just quick check-ins. He asked about my life, my friends, my garden. He listened when I talked. He shared when I asked. Natalie remained polite but distant. We would never be close, and I had accepted that. But she no longer treated me like an embarrassment. There were occasional dinners at their apartment, awkward but bearable. Progress, even if it was measured in inches. Patricia never apologized. I did not expect her to. People like Patricia do not apologize. They simply adjust their behavior when forced to. But she no longer made snide remarks. She no longer tried to diminish me. Perhaps she had learned that I was not someone to be underestimated. I focused on myself for the first time in decades. I joined a book club at the local library and discovered I loved discussing literature with strangers who became friends. I started traveling with Margaret, small trips at first weekend getaways to nearby towns, then longer journeys a week in Charleston, 10 days in Santa Fe. Places I had only dreamed about during all those years of working and saving and sacrificing. I learned how to be alone without being lonely. How to find joy in small things. Morning coffee on the porch, evening walks through the neighborhood. Sunday visits to Frank's grave where I would tell him about Derek, about my travels, about the woman I was becoming. I was not angry anymore. Not at Patricia, not at Natalie, not even at Derek for the hurt he had caused. Anger was heavy, and I had carried enough weight in my life. Letting it go felt like setting down a burden I had not even realized I was holding. Almost a year after the wedding, Derek called with news. Mom, Natalie is pregnant. You are going to be a grandmother. I sat down slowly, the phone pressed to my ear, tears already spilling. A grandmother, Frank's grandchild. A new life connected to me by blood and love and all the complicated history we had survived together. Congratulations, I managed to say. I am so happy for you both. There is something else, Derek added. Natalie wanted me to ask. She was hoping you might be involved. You know, with the baby. Be a real grandmother. Not just someone who visits on holidays. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the moment. I would like that very much, I said. A few weeks later, Natalie called me herself. It was the first time she had ever called, rather than just texting or speaking through Derek. Mrs. Johnson, she said, and then paused. I mean, Carol. Can I call you Carol? Of course. I wanted to say she hesitated. I wanted to say that I am sorry. For how things started between us. For how my mother and I treated you. It was wrong. I was silent, letting her continue. Derek showed me the letter you wrote him. The one about your sacrifices. About selling your wedding ring. About working double shifts. I did not know. I did not understand what you had been through. I appreciate you saying that, I said quietly. I want our child to know you, she continued. Really know you. Not just as Derek's mom, but as a person. As a grandmother who loves them. I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness, exactly. Forgiveness is not a single moment. It is a process. But this was an opening. A door that had been closed was now cracked open. I would like that, Natalie. More than you know. We talked for an hour that day. About her fears about becoming a mother. about my experiences raising Derek alone, about the kind of grandmother I hoped to be. When we hung up, I sat in my quiet house and felt something I had not felt in a long time. Hope. I thought about that wedding invitation, the one addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, the envelope that had nearly broken me. It had been an attempt to erase me, to make me invisible, to reduce me to a title that referenced a dead man. But I had refused to be erased. I had stood up. I had spoken out. I had demanded respect, not through anger or ultimatums, but through the simple act of valuing myself. And in doing so, I had taught my son something he needed to learn: that his mother was not just a background figure to be taken for granted, that I was a person with dignity and worth, that love does not mean accepting mistreatment. I picked up a frame from my bookshelf. Inside was the new wedding invitation, the one addressed to Mrs. Carol Johnson. Next to it was a photo of Frank taken the year before he died. I traced his face with my finger. "We did it," I whispered to him. "We raised a good man." It just took him a little longer to figure it out. The sun was setting outside my window, painting the sky in golds and purples. I watched the colors shift, feeling peaceful for the first time in a long while. I did not know what the future would hold. Life had taught me that plans change people, surprise you, and nothing is guaranteed. But I knew one thing for certain. I was not invisible. I never had been, and I never would be again. If you are watching this and you have ever felt overlooked, ignored, or diminished by the people who should love you most, I want you to know something. You matter. Your feelings matter. Your presence matters. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise. Sometimes standing up for yourself means walking away. Sometimes it means having hard conversations. Sometimes it means accepting that relationships will change, and that is okay. What matters is that you do not lose yourself in the process of loving others. I almost lost myself, but I found my way back. And if I can do it, so can you. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself within your own family? How did you find the courage? Please share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who is going through something similar. If this story touched you, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories and know they are not alone. And if you are new here, consider subscribing so you do not miss future stories of strength, resilience, and finding your voice. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being part of this community. May you always know your worth. May you always find the courage to speak your truth. And may you always be surrounded by people who see you, value you, and love you exactly as you are. Take care of yourselves. I will see you in the next one.